pull out some capital, and we moved into a 32-unit apartment building. So in November, end of 2018, I had what now is a business partner of mine approach me and say that a property manager brought this asset to him and said that the property manager wanted to keep the management. And so they were trying to figure out if they could get someone who would use that property manager and still make the transaction happen. So building looks pretty okay. Doesn't look too bad. What this doesn't show you is that 17 of the 32 units were vacant. It's a good thing if we're looking to add value. What also it didn't tell you is there was over 150,000 cockroaches in one unit. There were people that had abandoned units that had been left. This building was actually in the newspaper. It was a tough building that we knew there was going to be problems with it. But we purchased this asset for $3.4 million. We went through a ton of different lenders. We were like, someone has to lend on this. Someone has to give us some level of financing on this. What's that going to be? How much do you want to put in? And what we did was this was the same time where I probably talked to about 60, 70 different lenders to try and figure out a solution. And I kept hitting roadblocks. I wasn't able to figure out a way to use the same financing that I had from my prior asset, which was close to 100%, and apply that to this asset. I needed to inject capital. So I used that opportunity to go to what I would highly recommend the beginning investor to do, and go to friends and family. But I went to friends and family in a position where I had already had a successful track record. And I had someone who had a bunch of capital that I figured, hey, you want to come in and be a partner on this? Well, we were in negotiations. And the day of closing, we finalized what that financing solution was going to be. This building was split 3 ways. We were a third partner each. And my cousin came in, and instead of getting any finance, he actually paid the whole thing in cash. And he did it at 10% interest. So he paid this entire $3.4 million at 10% interest, and he said he would do draws for the construction. Let me tell you, we have a lot better financing options that we work with now than that one. However, we gave a third of the asset value and a pretty solid return to make this asset come together. I'll touch on a couple of these other items, but I'll give you a bit of the end of the story on this one. The asset value now is somewhere between $11 and $14 million. Our total cost, I was actually on a call with my business partner for this right before this call. Our total cost is still under $8 million. Now, as it states here, we had a flood, and we figured, with 32 units, we're just changing the kitchens and paint and whatnot. We don't need to worry about permits. Well, when the flood happened and the boiler went, and all of the pipes in the wall that were going through the boiler started to pop. So all the seams started to burst. So a couple of units had massive flooding. When we had the whole thing inspected, we were then told that the boiler was at its life, but it wasn't just the boiler. It was all the pipes running through the walls. And though we could fix this one unit and replace the pipes in this one unit, that wouldn't solve the fact that afterwards we'd likely have multiple other floods. I have some photos that I can possibly show if someone wants to ask that question or remind you afterwards, but it flooded in March. In March in St. Catharines, is it hot or is it cold? It's pretty cold. So what we actually had was freezing. On the far right, where this telephone pole is, to the windows just above that second canopy, that entire, from the top down to the bottom, on the outside was frozen. There was ice forming on the entire outside of the building. Insurance, no big deal. That's what we thought. The problem is that flood triggered a lot of major upgrades to the building that then required a permit, that then required inspections, and then required a lot of additional items, such as replacing 146 windows. That wasn't in the budget. So we found different ways to make it work. We found a wholesaler that would do all of the windows, 30-year warranty for $1,000 a window. Whereas the 8 windows alone through the insurance claim, if we had it paid out that way, was charging $60,000 to replace them with the same steel windows. So we had to learn on our feet. And the reason I tell you this story is that we went from duplex conversions and legal accessory suites to a 32-unit asset. We knew there would be problems. We knew there would be hiccups, but we also knew that if we kept our head high, we had the right mindset, we had the right power team, that we could get through it. Now, one of the following slides I'm going to share is a number of people on the power team you're going to want, and I'm going to identify a story behind why you want each of these people. And you may look at it and say, well, I can do this or I can do that. Quite often people say, well, I can do my own property management. The problem is on a 32-unit apartment building, if you do your own property management, you better live around the corner because there's probably going to be a lot of calls and you're going to have to deal with a lot of people. So keep these different things in mind. Also, when you register a corporation, you're going to buy assets in a corporation. I've actually changed my address on all corporations now to my lawyer's office. And my lawyer will get the phone calls and my lawyer will get the mail, because realistically, I don't want my primary residence being available to the public. I don't want my home that I live in or the office that I work in to be available to the public and have tenant issues, because some of these tenants are crazy. Some of them are great, but some of them do cause problems, and you don't want to have those problems show up for you. What I will finish with on this slide is this kind of in the middle. In the middle here, where it says limited market analysis was done for this building. The items that we cover now, the analysis that we do now, the financing that we do now, it all has a purpose. And if you're wondering why on an apartment building would I need to get an environmental report for financing? Because with my cousin paying cash on this property, we didn't do an environmental. We didn't do an appraisal. We didn't have an energy efficiency audit. We didn't have a drawdown audit. We didn't have inspections based on the completion to see if we could get draws of financing. All those things are put in place to ensure that the lender has a secure asset. So even though you can bypass it, if a lender wants to ensure that they have those pieces in place for a solid asset, maybe you should have that same stuff in place. These are things that were costs that we were concerned on, that we didn't think we had upside on. Looking back on now, we apply to every single asset that our team works with. And every single one of the agents on my team hear these stories day in and day out. And I bring them to sites day in and day out. And they're with me when police call me and talk about something that happened at a site day in and day out. These are the things that happen through real estate investing. And at the same time, I get to live a really awesome life. These are the costs that I apply to be able to do what I do, and also to be able to gentrify certain neighborhoods. Now, I wish I had an after photo. We've actually painted this building, done new roofs, done new windows, done all new plumbing, all new electrical, fully refinished all the units. And we would have been done this in a year and a half. Thank God we didn't, because the value of it, we only had pegged at 6.8 million. Now we're double that. And we had 14 months where after that flood occurred, the city shut us down for a stop work order. So we had 10% interest accumulating every month. We actually had 16 units that were finished. They didn't kick us out. And we had accumulated debt over and over and over again. And the city would not work with us. Luckily, November last year, the inspector was let go of. He was fired. A new inspector came on and our permit was issued in January. And this building, if you can see those two canopies, it's kind of like a semi-detached house, but it's an apartment building. There's a divider wall, fire separator right in the middle between those two doors. And on the inside of those doors are 1-bedroom units. On the outside are 2-bedroom units. The entire left half of this building has gone from gutted to going to be completed in the next 4 weeks. We have 9 guys going full time. But what we calculated is our interest on this asset is costing us about $27,000 a week. So we need to be moving on it to ensure that we capitalize on the most value because of all the hiccups that we've had. Luckily, we've made it a really nice asset.